Prime Video's The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power is off to a great start. The immersive fantasy series has managed to be a hit not just among new viewers, but also among die-hard fans of Tolkien's magical work. In today's video, we'll be looking at all of the great Easter eggs and references you might have missed in the first two episodes. So let's dive right in. Starting off the list, we've got Finrod's scratches. This Easter egg doesn't take too long to pop up. In fact, it's from the show's very prologue. In the introduction to the series, we see Galadriel narrating a tale about her fallen brother Finrod. An interesting detail that was given a lot of focus was the scratches and wounds on his arms. Well, this is said to be the mark that Sauron has inflicted on the elf. The more detailed explanation of it can be found in the Silmarillion. In the book, we find out that Finrod was on his way to a quest, assisting Beren and Luthien on their mission to attain the jewels called Silmarils. But before they could achieve their goal, they were captured by the one and only Sauron. The villain wasn't actually the Dark Lord at the time, but he wasn't any less scary. He intended to kill the group off one by one using a werewolf. In an attempt to save Beren, Galadriel's heroic brother burst through his constraints and fought the werewolf toe to toe. He took the monster down with his bare hands and teeth, but in the attempt was mortally wounded himself. So yeah, those scratches we see on him weren't just from any regular weapon like a sword or a spear. No, they were from a literal werewolf. Definitely a very fitting way to go for a character from a fantasy series, we must say. Next, eagle-eyed viewers might have caught the Oath of Fëanor. Another interesting Easter egg from the Silmarillion book is the Oath of Fëanor. While the series quickly rushes by this in its prologue, it's actually a very pretty significant event from the original novels, and one that's forever cemented in the history of Middle-earth. The oath is taken by Fëanor and his 7 sons, and let's just say, leads to a bunch of really bad things happening later down the line. In the books, the oath is described to be under the light of torches, with blood-red swords drawn in the air. While the look of the scene isn't nearly as dark or brooding as it's described in the book, it's very likely to be the same oath. If not, it's a very clear nod to it, which is why it still deserves to be on this list of Easter eggs. Plus, there were hints of some battles and wars we've heard of before. Just considering the sheer size of the Silmarillion, we're not surprised to see why the Rings of Power has chosen to skim through a lot of the events in a quick way. While this helps to make it feel like the story isn't starting with a literal history lesson, it does make it tough to connect the dots and find out what happens when. In its prologue, you might have noted a couple of hints to a few battles and wars we know about from Tolkien's expansive history of Middle-earth. There's a pretty iconic shot of a dragon throwing a giant eagle to the ground. This is likely to be part of the War of Wrath, which is a massive conflict that takes place right before the Rings of Power series begins. But that's not all though. In another shot, we see Galadriel picking up a helmet and adding it to a much larger pile of helmets. This is likely to be from the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. To put it simply, the good guys lost this one hard, and the end of the battle resulted in a massive pile of corpses piling up on each other. While it's not quite the same as a bunch of helmets stacked together, the overall tone of the scene really makes it feel like it's hinting at the tragic battle. Moving on, the series kept a unique detail from the Fellowship of the Ring. If you've seen Peter Jackson's extended edition of the Fellowship of the Ring, you might recall Galadriel sailing on a swan boat. The Rings of Power seems to have kept this detail, with Galadriel making her way to Valinor in a similar looking boat. We're sure you're wondering just what all these swan boats are about. And of course, it's already been answered by Tolkien. The ships originate from a place called Aquilond, which roughly means the haven of the swans. So yeah, we're sure you can see where this is going. The place is where a specific group of elves live, and they seem to be the ones crafting these unique looking ships. The elves, which are referred to as Teleri, seem to have traveled to a number of places on these ships, having even reached the island of Numenor. Their arrival is said to be similar to white birds sailing from the sunset, and so it's clear that these elves seem to love their swan-shaped boats. Next up, here's an Easter egg about the Harfoots. Harfoots in the Rings of Power are as you'd expect a native fantasy race to be. They're scared of hunters and really good at remaining hidden and avoiding trouble. All things considered though, they're pretty smart. This is seen from one of the Harfoots blowing a whistle, indicating to his friends that it was safe to come out. While it may seem like a basic thing, die-hard fans might be thinking back to a specific event after seeing all this play out. This is from when Theoden, King of Rohan, strikes up a chat with a few hobbits in Isengard. The conversation, which plays out in the Two Towers book, has the king bonding with the hobbits because their ancestors were all from the same place in Middle-earth. This place happens to be near where the Harfoots are depicted to be living in the Rings of Power. During the talk, Theoden mentions how he's heard about halflings from the stories his ancestors used to tell him, and these small creatures are known to have a very interesting and useful set of skills. They're known to be super agile and can disappear in mere seconds. They can even change their voices to sound like birds. Up until this point, we really didn't know if the king's words were an accurate description or just a myth that the ancestors had passed down, but it seems the Rings of Power has confirmed that those are indeed some of the qualities observed in the Harfoots. Speaking of the Harfoots, we can't ignore their connection with the Hobbits. The Harfoots in the Rings of Power and the Hobbits seem to have enough similarities that we think that they may be distantly related. There's definitely some differences that we must first address. For one, the Harfoots tend to be wandering nomads, whereas the Hobbits tend to enjoy a more comfortable life. But there's one very important thing that links them still, and that's food. Harfoots are shown to have a diet that feels very much like the Hobbits. We get to see their interest in the subject when Nori leads a group of these small creatures to a berry patch. One of the ways the Shire is said to thrive after the death of Sauron is through fruit. After the War of the Ring, it is said that the young hobbits used to bathe in strawberries and cream, and their lawns had plum trees for days. The eventual evolution of the Harfoots into the hobbits will surely bring about a ton of changes, but the race's fascination with fruits seems to continue all throughout the ages. And we've got to say that's quite an interesting detail to preserve. And wrapping up this video, we've got a cool tidbit about the dwarves. The dwarves have a rather interesting story surrounding their creation. They are said to be formed by an angelic being known as Aul, and it seems like a lot of the dwarven culture has revolved around this interesting deity. In the first 2 episodes, we've seen a couple of references to the maker of the dwarves. Aul was mentioned by Durin IV when he described breaking rocks like a dwarven test of endurance created by Aul himself. The deity was then mentioned again by Disa when she's showing her disapproval at Durin and Elrond's argument by calling out to Aul's beard. To regular fans, this might seem like a random name drop, but longtime fans of Tolkien's work will be able to pick up on this little tidbit immediately. We're sure to see a lot more about the dwarves in the Rings of Power. The creators behind the show have stated that they wish to approach the race with a lot more seriousness than what we've had before, so we're definitely excited to get a closer look into the history and culture of this unique fantasy race. That's a wrap for this video. Did you pick up on these Easter eggs during the first 2 episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.